Do you spend heaps of time sitting? That can cause a huge issue with your lower back. I'm Dr Kez, Doctor of Chiropractic. I'm going to take you through a couple of tips on how you can help alleviate back pain just by altering the way that you are sitting. First things first though, I need to introduce you to a really important muscle that becomes really short and tight when we spend heaps of time sitting. It's called our hip flexor, or iliopsoas for those of you who know the technical name for our hip flexors. And it runs from the femur bone, the thigh bone, and it goes all the way up through the pelvis. Here's an example of a spine to show you what we're talking about. And it comes up and it attaches to the front of your lumbar spine. So it makes sense that this muscle, when it's tight, can aggravate lower back issues. When you're in a seated position, like M is right now, that muscle is at the shortest distance that it can be. If you spend heaps of time there, the brain starts to register this new shortened length and it keeps it at a shortened length. Now that's a big problem because when you go to stand up, because it attaches to the thigh bone, it will pull. Because it's so short, it will pull on the front of your lumbar spine where it attaches, and it will create an increased arch in your lower back, which leads to heaps of back pain. So we've got to teach you how to sit in a way that takes pressure off your lumbar spine and really encourage you to get up and stretch whenever possible. So let's take a look at what happens when we sit down. Take a sit for me. Generally speaking, most often our desk height is set. Some people are lucky enough to have a sit-stand desk, but for most of us, our desk is at a set height. So we need to make sure that our chair elevates to make sure that our elbows and our shoulders get a bit of a rest. So we lift our chair height so that when our hands are touching our keyboard on our desk, we've got a 90-degree angle here at the elbow. Anything higher and we're getting an extra bend in the elbow, anything lower and we tend to slouch forward and aggravate the middle part of our back. So we raise up our chair, but the difficulty with that is it means there is a greater distance for our feet to hit the floor. If your knees fall below the level of your hips, you will pull on your lumbar spine the entire time that you're sitting at your desk. So if that happens to you, that you've got to raise your desk height to get your arms in the chair height to get your arms at the desk height, what we need to do is then elevate your knees. Now, best way to do that is to find something you can prop your feet on. Once upon a time, we used to recommend something like a phone book or something, but something that can just elevate your feet enough so that your knees are above the level of your hip. It takes off an enormous amount of pressure from your lower back. Another way you can achieve this, roll up a towel, place it underneath the front of your hamstrings, which are the thigh muscles, and then rest yourself down. This is a really good thing to do in the car when you've got a long drive ahead of you. You obviously can't elevate your feet when you're driving in a car because you need to be able to reach the pedals, but by placing something underneath your knees, so under the front part of your hamstring, it prevents you from slouching down and ending up with a really poor posture that can aggravate your back as well. So this is a good trick for long car trips. So that is another great way that you can do that. What we want you to do when you are spending lots of time sitting, this includes traveling in the car or sitting at your desk, or even sitting during your job, doing whatever it is that you might be doing, is change the length and position of that hip flexor. So we get up and move around if you possibly can. Obviously, you can get up and move your chair out the way, stand up and do just some marching on the spot, which will alter the length of the muscle. That is shortening it, lengthening it, shortening it, lengthening it. When we do that, massive increase in blood flow, which is really good for a muscle that's been stuck at one length for ages. You can stretch with a hip flexor. Great hip flexor stretch to do is to place the legs apart and then push the pelvis forward. Remember, this muscle attaches to your pelvis, so we want to make sure that we've got the spine upright so that when we stretch and push our pelvis forward, literally push your pelvis forward, you should feel that back leg getting a nice stretch up and through that muscle. So it's telling the brain that muscle needs to be elongated. It needs to be at a longer length, which will then stop tugging on the front of the spine, creating issues with lower back problems, aggravating arthritis, and even potentially causing disc problems. So it is really important to make sure that we get good length in this muscle. So let's stretch this muscle. Let's keep the length changing in this muscle and make sure that you don't get stuck in one seated position for too long. Modify the environment, whether you're sitting on the couch at home, sitting on your desk or at your desk or in your car. Do something to make sure that those knees are above or at the level of your hip height to make sure that you get the best out of your lower back, because lower back problems can lead to massive far-reaching implications, even for your family and how you're feeling from a mental health perspective. And it's one of the key problems that when this issue is tight, that pelvis is tilted because of that tight hip flexor, we end up with hip problems, knee problems, feet problems like Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis. We then end up with changes in our upper body, which can lead to rounding of the shoulders, neck pain and headaches. So this muscle is really important to stretch. That is how we can help modify the way you sit. Make sure you change position, and that will help you with your lower back pain. Thanks for having us on your therapeutic journey.